Welcome back to Murder in the Black. It is your host, Steph, and I'm grateful to be here with you. Let me be real with y'all for a second. I went back and forth about whether I even wanted to drop an episode this week. Part of me wanted you to enjoy your turkey, your dressing, your mac and cheese, and that one cousin who always brings store-bought rolls but swears they're homemade. I picture all of you fully stretched out on the couch, drifting into that post-Thanksgiving food coma we call the itis, promising you'll never eat this much again while already plotting on your second plate. But then I remembered something important. Everybody doesn't get the full holiday break. For some of you, this is just a regular Thursday. And for others, you're clocking right back in tomorrow morning with the same energy as the turkey you just had, stuffed and absolutely over it. So since this episode was already prepared, I figured, let's go ahead and get into it. November 20th, 1984, the day before Simeon's season opener, a regular school day full of noise, students laughing, hallway chaos, the smell of cafeteria food nobody wants to eat. Benji, even with the weight of his relationship issues with his girlfriend, Jatan, walks her to the bus stop. A simple act, a teenage moment, a moment that should have been routine. And then suddenly, chaos. Kids ran back toward the school screaming, Benji got shot. Friends sprinted toward the scene and found Benji Wilson, the #1 high school basketball player in the nation, lying near a fence, conscious, gasping, fighting for breath. He'd been shot twice. One bullet pierced his groin, striking major arteries. He was losing blood faster than any of them could have understood. This was the boy Chicago believed in, the kid who carried the hopes of a city on his shoulders. EMT finally arrived, but policy failed him long before the ambulance ever moved. Back then, Chicago required gunshot victims to be taken to the nearest hospital, not the one that could save him. So they took Benji to St. Bernard Hospital, which had no trauma center, no trauma surgeon, no vascular surgeon. He waited almost 2 hours before receiving the surgery he needed the moment he arrived. By the time doctors could operate, it was too late. His legs had no circulation. His organs were shutting down. His brain had been without oxygen too long. Mary Wilson, a nurse, a mother, watched her child slip away in real time. At 5 a.m. the next morning, she made the unimaginable decision. Take him off life support. Chicago lost its son, and a dream was interrupted. Langston Hughes asked us all a question. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up? Does it sag like a heavy load? Does it explode? Well, with Benji, the dream didn't just defer. It burst. It sent shockwaves through Chicago because Benji wasn't just an athlete. He was possibility. He was the pride of a neighborhood. He was the boy mothers pointed to and said, see, greatness can come from here. When his life was interrupted, the hurt wasn't quiet. It reverberated through the city, through schools, gyms, families, and generations. Benji Wilson was born in March 1967 to his mother, Mary, and his father, Ben Sr. Later, Mary would divorce Ben Sr. in 1974. Mary was strict, devout, intentional, the kind of mother who believed in raising her 5 boys to become men. Eventually, after the divorce, they moved to Calvin Park, a neighborhood on Chicago's South Side, a community built on working class families, discipline, love, and survival. Now, for Benji, basketball wasn't always his focus, but once he took it seriously in about the 7th or 8th grade, he became a student of the game. He studied legends, he practiced relentlessly under the guidance of Coach Robert Hope. He honed a work ethic that would define him. He was still a teen, though. curious, emotional, imperfect, and his older brother sometimes had to step in to keep him grounded. After all, that's what family does. In 1981, he decided to attend Simeon Career Academy, and Chicago didn't quite know it yet, but a star had arrived. Now, Benji came from humble beginnings because when he arrived at Simeon Career Academy, he started on the freshman team. But that summer, he had a growth spurt, starting at 5'10, ending at 6'5 in one summer. His feet, limbs, coordination, all catching up to his talent. Coach Robert Wolverine Hambrick initially didn't put him on varsity, and it took members on the varsity squad who watched Benji relentlessly practice his jump shot in the gym to convince Coach Hambrick to allow Benji to just try out. And when he did, Benji soared. He had that rare combination, smoothness and grit, a jumper that looked natural, a gentleness paired with fierce competition. By junior year, he became the #1 high school basketball player in the nation. Recruiters flooded the Wilson home. Mary said it felt like the Grand Central Station. There was always a train coming. Off the court, he was in love with Jatan Rush. And they had a son named Brandon, who was born shortly before Benji's senior year. Benji desired to be a good father, and he wanted everything life had in store for him. And at that time, it was a lot. Benji and Simeon Career Academy dominated the court. They went on to compete at the state championship in 1984, defeating Evanston Township to become the state champions. That summer, at the Athletes for Better Education camp in Princeton, New Jersey, Benji became a national icon. His leadership was undeniable, his talent magnetic. Benji was handsome and he was poised in front of the camera. He was the golden child. In his senior year, he asked his friend Nick Anderson, who was also a prospect in the game, to transfer to Simeon so they could dominate in their senior year. Everything was lining up. Everything was pointing toward greatness. Now, you can't talk about basketball greatness in America without talking about where the best players are born, shaped, tested, and hardened. And there are 3 cities that stand at the top of that mountain: Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. But here's the thing, each one produces a different kind of hooper. Chicago ball players, they're gritty, they're elegant. They play with a certain smoothness that hides how tough they are. Kids in Chicago grow up playing in packed gyms during the winter where the floors squeak, the air is cold, and the competition is unforgiving. You can earn your place in Chicago gym. There's no entitlement, no skipping the grind. The city turns raw kids into polished players because survival and skill become one language. New York brings the flash, the street handles, the swagger, the concrete creativity of Rucker Park, and the playground legends whose names echo across generations. It's gritty in its own way, but it's loud, proud, and like New York, Showtime ready. Los Angeles has a different energy. Sunshine ball, finesse, high-level AAU circuits, and access to elite training early. Smooth, polished, West Coast, cool. But Chicago is spiritual when it comes to basketball. Chicago ball is fight, faith, and finesse wrapped into one. And that's the world Benji Wilson rolls out of. A city built to shape champions and a champion built to carry a city. But on November 20th, everything changed. Hey, what's up, y'all? It is Steph, and before we dive deeper into our episode for today, I've got a quick reminder for you. We're growing our Murder in the Black community over on YouTube, and to celebrate, we're hosting a holiday giveaway as our thank you for helping us expand. It's super simple to enter. Head on over to YouTube, subscribe to our channel, pick any video, and leave a comment. That's it. You're officially entered. The giveaway ends November 30th, so don't wait, y'all. Tap the YouTube link in the show notes and join the fam over there. Let's grow together. Now, let's get back into our episode. When the shooting happened, confusion and fear spread even faster than the news itself. And quickly, two competing stories emerged, not just about what happened, but why. And shortly after Benji's shooting, the police were able to capture the two assailants who were responsible: Billy Moore, who was 16 years old, and Omar Dixon, who was 15. Both who were associated with the gangsters' disciples who at the time ran the south side of Chicago. The first theory that the two boys admitted to in a signed statement was this. According to this version, Billy Moore and Omar Dixon approached Benji with the intent to rob him. Something went wrong, obviously. Benji resisted, and Billy pulled the trigger. It was straightforward. It was severe, and this aligned with the city's fear about gang violence. When you have a narrative that matches public perception, prosecutors rarely let go of it. And this was the story that most people knew first. Now, it wasn't until the trial took place that another theory emerged, because Billy and Omar recanted the signed statements that they initially signed, claiming that it was under the coercion of the detectives who interviewed them in the first place. But here's the second theory. Billy said Benji shoved him. Billy showed his gun, hoping that alone would end the tension. Benji stepped forward, frustrated with the argument with his girlfriend, and now this guy who was trying to confront him about a push. And so he said something on the lines of, "Oh, you gonna shoot me now?" Billy claimed he stepped back twice, panicked, scared, fueled by impulse, and then he fired. Not planned, not targeted, not a robbery. Just a tragic chain reaction between two boys caught in a moment that neither could take back. And through all of this, Billy insisted one thing consistently: Omar wasn't involved. Two stories, two truths, one irreversible outcome. When the case finally made it to trial, the courtroom wasn't just full, it was packed. Reporters, students, teachers, community members, people who didn't even know Benji personally, but felt like they did because that's how big his presence was in Chicago. And sitting at those defense tables were two teenagers: 16-year-old Billy Moore and 15-year-old Omar Dixon, boys who suddenly found themselves at the center of one of the most emotionally charged cases in the city's history. Let's walk through what happened in that courtroom. Both boys were charged as adults and not juveniles. They faced first-degree murder, attempted armed robbery, aggravated battery. The prosecution wasn't playing around. They were stacking charges like they were building a wall, one that neither boy expected to get over. The state came in with simple, polished, easy-to-swallow narrative. Billy Moore and Omar Dixon tried to rob Benji. Benji resisted. Billy shot him. Case closed. It was neat. It was digestible. And most importantly, it matched the public anger and fear of the moment. Jatan Rush, Benji's girlfriend, was the emotional anchor of the trial. She had just lost the father of her child. She was grieving, and she told the jury that Billy and Omar approached them. One of them tried to rob Benji. Billy pulled a gun. Omar was there and involved. Her voice shook. She cried at points, and you could feel the jury lean in. Not because they were analyzing facts, but because emotion talks louder in a courtroom than evidence ever will. Several witnesses who were near the shooting testified. Their stories didn't match perfectly because, let's be real, people barely remember what happened in the hallway during a fire drill. But the prosecution used them to paint the picture. Two boys confronted Benji. There was yelling, then gunshots, then they ran away. Even if the details were fuzzy, the jury got the message. Now, according to Billy and Omar, they were at Simeon because his cousin got into it with someone who stole $10 from her. But when they arrived at the school that day, the matter had already resolved itself peacefully. And that's why he brought a gun to school, because he didn't know how it would end. And so he decided just to hang out around Simeon's high school until school let out. And that's when he eventually met up with Benji. Detectives during the trial testified that they arrested Billy and Omar within hours. They recovered the weapon. Both boys signed a confession. And when a jury hears the word confession, they don't always stop to question how that confession came to be. Now, Billy Moore's defense team didn't even try to pretend the shooting didn't happen. Billy himself said from day one that he fired the gun. But they pushed hard to correct the narrative. They told the jury that this wasn't a robbery. There was no plan. Billy and Benji bumped into each other. Words were exchanged. Benji shoved Billy. Billy flashed a gun to scare him. Billy panicked and fired when Benji stepped forward. Billy didn't testify. His lawyers were afraid the prosecution would tear him apart, but that meant the jury never heard from him directly. They only heard the state's version of his voice. Omar's lawyers had a completely different job. They had to convince the jury that Omar shouldn't have been sitting at the defendant table at all. They said Omar didn't have a gun. Omar didn't order anything. He didn't participate. His so-called confession was coerced. He was just a scared 15-year-old boy pushed into saying something that they wanted at the wrong time and at the wrong place. Billy himself would later say Omar had nothing to do with it, and he maintained that during the trial. This courtroom wasn't neutral. Chicago was grieving, was angry. They had lost several to gun violence, including Benji, and they wanted someone to be held accountable. With both sides rested, the jury went to deliberate, and they were back in 1 hour. They rendered their verdict. Billy Moore and Omar Dixon were guilty on all charges. Billy Moore was sentenced to 40 years, and Omar Dixon sentenced to 30 years. Billy apologized to the Wilson family. He has expressed deep remorse then and now. He continues to insist that Omar wasn't involved. Both men eventually served all of their time and were released as adults. This entire case is devastating, no matter what theory you choose to believe as it relates to the murder of Benji Wilson. Whether you lean toward the robbery narrative or the confrontation gone wrong version, the truth remains the same. Benji's life was stolen. But there's another layer of tragedy that is talked about when we discuss the case of Benji Wilson. When Benji was taken to St. Bernard Hospital, he was taken to a facility that had no trauma center, no vascular surgeon, and no ability to manage a gunshot wound of that severity. He lay there for nearly 2 hours before surgery began. 2 hours. And Mary Wilson, a nurse, understood exactly what that meant. She watched the monitors. She watched the color drain from her son's face. She watched time slipping away. This wasn't just about violence. It was about an institutional failure. It was about a system that didn't prioritize Black lives in trauma response or any lives. It was about a policy that made no sense for a city with this level of gun violence. Because in 1984, Chicago still had a lot of gun violence. So the Wilson family later filed a lawsuit against St. Bernard Hospital, and in 1992, the case was settled. But more importantly, Chicago changed the EMS policy. Gunshot victims would now be taken directly to trauma centers, not just the closest hospital. The policy change has saved lives. Benji didn't survive, but his story reshaped emergency care for the entire city. Chicago didn't just mourn Benji, it ached for him. At his funeral, More than 10,000 people gathered at Operation Push. Students, teammates, strangers, elders, celebrities, people who didn't even know him personally showed up because they knew what he represented. R. Kelly sang at his service. Jesse Jackson spoke. It felt like the entire city wrapped itself around the Wilson family, trying to give them strength, even though nothing could ever fill the void. Simeon played a memorial game against Evanston, and even though the gym was full, the atmosphere was heavy. You could feel the grief in the air, like a storm cloud that refused to move. And they won that game in memory of Benji. Years later, Benji's impact kept unfolding. Derrick Rose wore number 25 at Simeon in Benji's honor. Jabari Parker followed the same tradition, leading Simeon to 3 state titles. Coaches continue to tell Benji's story to every generation of young players out of Chicago. His legacy became a part of Chicago's DNA. But the loss didn't end with him. Benji's son, Brandon Wilson, grew up without his father, and he passed away in 2021 at just 37 years old in a car accident. 2 generations gone too soon. Yet in all of this grief, Mary Wilson transformed pain into purpose. She became a champion for youth, for safety, for trauma policy. Her voice helped shape reforms that continue to save lives today. Benji's legacy isn't just athletic, it's civic, it's cultural, it's spiritual. His name still carries weight in Chicago gyms. His story still moves people to tears, and the number 25 remains sacred. Takeaway. Benji's story forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths. It reminds us that dreams don't always die quietly. Sometimes they explode, sending shockwaves through families, communities, and entire cities. 2 competing theories about what happened that day still exist, and regardless of what you believe unfolded, the fact remains. A young life was taken. Benji didn't get to become the man he was destined to be. Brandon didn't get to build the life his father never saw. 2 seeds from the same tree, gone before their time. Mary Wilson, through the worst pain a mother can experience, refused to let her son's legacy fade. Her advocacy changed policies, her voice saved lives. Her love kept Benji alive in the hearts of a city that still speaks his name like a prayer. A dream deferred? Yes. A dream denied? Absolutely. But a dream forgotten? Never. Benji Wilson lives on in the players who wear number 25, in the gym floors of Chicago, in every trauma victim who gets the right care in time, and in every young person who believes that greatness is possible even on the South Side. Mary Wilson passed away in 2000. Before I let you go, if nobody has told you today, Happy Turkey Day, fam. I appreciate you. I'm grateful for you. And thank you for making Murder in the Black part of your world, especially during a holiday where everything feels louder, heavier, and busier. Thank you for listening. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for caring about these stories. And don't forget, bonus content drops Saturday this week for our paid subscribers. And I want to remind everyone, YouTube giveaway, subscribe, comment, and enter. From my table to yours, happy Thanksgiving. I love y'all.